Hello and welcome to the award-winning Gutter. I've got Mark making his debut, Mark Henry Davies. I like saying the full double barrel name, Mark Henry Davies, so I'm going to keep saying it, okay? I know you don't want me to, I'm going to keep doing it. Maybe even over go, Mark Henry Davies, what do you think about transfers?
Yeah.
That sort of thing might happen.
Go with it.
Joshy Sexton.
Famously.
I know what you think about transfers.
And about my double-barreled name, Joshy Sexton.
Joshy Sexton, Bethy Lindop is here in the house as well. Who's really pleased because on my agenda it says we're going to talk about the manager's job again. She loves it when we talk about the manager's job. Can't wait to talk about it. But first,
I've not said enough about it, quite frankly.
You've not said enough. You're going to make this, so I'm going to let you say more. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about our lovely sponsors, our good friends at NordVPN.
Wait.
Really? You can get on NordVPN. I'm going early with this, and we're going to nordvpn.com/TAW. You, Beth, will get you specifically will get a great deal exclusive to you and those like you, and like Josh and like Mark. Joshy, do you like extra internet security and peace of mind?
It's my favourite.
Is it?
Yeah.
You want to get on NordVPN, mate.
Oh, wow.
Mark, do you like having the ability to change your virtual location with a click of a button?
More than anything in the world, Rob.
Gosh, I think you should get on NordVPN as well. And I bet you're the sort of guy that definitely likes a 30-day money-back guarantee, yeah?
Read me like a book.
Read him like a book. And not a cheap book either, an expensive book. Expensive book of quality. And there's some sort of percentage saving you get if you do it through nordvpn.com/TAW. I think it's pretty good. Like a real, say 60% maybe.
I'm actually really sad because I am already a NordVPN subscriber, so I'm missing out on this excellent deal.
Cancel
I
it
am as
and
well,
then
by the way.
cancel it and then resubscribe with the
maybe
whatever
do that.
percentage
I've
it
got the
is.
same problem.
Yeah.
Same problem. I subscribe to NordVPN. I mean, we're living proof
Yeah.
that NordVPN is a thing.
You're preaching to the choir here.
Yeah.
Preaching to the choir. Okay, should we talk about transfers then?
Let's do
I
it.
could talk about NordVPN for 35 minutes, but I want to talk transfers as well. I'm not going to start with Beth because I don't want to upset her early doors, Josh. But the memory of the brilliant Liverpool 1, Chelsea 1 game is still fresh, where we all booed our little hearts out at the end. I didn't boo. I'm not that kind of guy. But I heard those boos. Couldn't avoid those boos. The manager's job. I was talking to Neil about this before we started recording, and he said online there's a lot of people still defending the manager and don't quite understand. I think when you're on the ground in the city of Liverpool, quite frankly, what a groundswell it feels like there is sometimes, that can't quite process that he might be the manager next season. I mean, I lost count of the people that sort of collared me on Saturday night when I was out and about in the pubs and clubs of Liverpool, who said, "He's got to go, Rob. He's got to go." They also had Cockney accents for some reason.
That was just me doing my Cockney accent too.
He's got to go, Rob. He's got to, man. So anyway, these Liverpool fans, Everton would love this. These Liverpool fans were saying it just feels, in all seriousness, it feels such a groundswell on some level that the distance between that and the briefings from the club that, what are you talking about? Of course he's staying. It doesn't quite work for a lot of people.
And I think why it's tricky is that maybe sometimes in these arguments with like Liverpool fans where there are factions, it feels like you can just sort of divide it up into black and white. Oh, well, it's one's online and one's in the ground, and that's not really the case this time. Like, I think there are people online who are both defending him, and then people who are, in a different faction of the online community are also saying that he should go at basically any opportunity they can get. That also exists in real life, where there are people saying, I almost keep going back to head and heart. Like, my heart is saying that he should have credit in the bank for winning the league last season, but then my head, when I watch the football, keeps going, well, this is just hopeless, turgid shite, to be honest, and I would quite like that to change. And the idea of going into next season knowing that isn't going to change, just to me feels like he's on hiding to nothing, which again is when my heart comes back into it of like, well, I don't really want this guy to go out completely hated. Like, he doesn't deserve to go out in the way that Hodgson did, for example. I think he should go out with still some of that credit in the bank, that we can be like, well, he was a league winning manager. He can stay on that banner if he would like to, if the fans would like him to, with all the league winning managers on. Absolutely fine with that. But yeah, I'm worried that the longer this goes on, that he is just on a hide into nothing. Like, I can imagine a scenario where Liverpool don't start the season well next season, and that toxicity that's already building up around the club with the boos that you hear on Saturday. I wasn't around for the full-time whistle, I'll be honest, when those boos happened, but I was in the ground for the Engamoa boos, and
which were unfair.
Yeah, it was strange. It was strange in some senses, because to me was a pretty innocuous substitution, whether the lad had cramp or not. He not took a man on, which is his job basically for about half an hour, and to keep the more experienced Gakpo on the pitch, put him in his natural position. didn't feel like the worst thing in the world to me, and I also have not been, pleased with Gakpo's season by any stretch of the imagination, but it felt like an innocuous change to me. And yet I think the boos are indicative of that thing that he's on a hide into nothing. Whereas,
they were waiting to boo. People were waiting
exactly,
to boo.
Whereas it's tricky because I'm sure we'll discuss some of the managerial options. I'm not wholly thrilled at some of the people who are being linked with the job, but Xabi Alonso is the one to me who feels like the sort of shining beacon of hope, where if Alonso came in and started next season as badly as Slot did, if we sort of, can almost theoretically line them up side by side, I know that Alonso wouldn't get the same reaction that Slot would, and that to me is where I'm kind of looking at the club to be like, you think it's less of a risk to keep Slot. I can promise you that just isn't really the case at this stage, because that goodwill has eroded so much.
That is the key to me, Mark, is to the timing of if Liverpool are to make the change or not. It's got to be to do with the confidence of how you think next season starts. There's nothing, from my point of view, the reason I think they should have made the change mentally already and committed to it is because a mantra I keep hearing actually around Liverpool is, but if he survives this season, and if we don't set off like a house on fire next season, the calls from the manager's head are going to be even more intense, and therefore there's going to be pressure to make a change early on in the season. And there'll be a sense of, regardless who they manage to get in, short of getting Jurgen Klopp back, there'll be a sense that the season itself will have been wasted. That the chance for Liverpool to reboot and reset and become a title-challenging team. Let's put it this way, if they change to Xabi Alonso and they buy 3 or 4 players that get the fans talking, there's a chance that we start the beginning of the season, next season, with fans going, we can win this league again, we were title winners a year before. But if you go again with Arne Slot, the fans won't start the season thinking we're likely to go for the title again. I think the fans will believe there's a chance we'll be changing manager within a month or so. And that's what worries me, is the sense we might waste another season.
I completely agree. It needs to be remembered that we actually won our first 7 games this season.
Yeah.
We could easily win our first 7 games of next season. But as soon as that 8th game comes, or maybe it's the 10th game, or whatever
First
game,
adverse result.
Yeah. And even in his first season, win our first 3, go to Old Trafford, look brilliant. 4th game, stunk the place out against Notts Forest. If something like that happens again, you're completely right. And it's just, everyone's saying the same. It feels like end of days Rodgers, where maybe there'll be a couple of changes in the backroom staff over the summer, and then he'll be like, I'm going to fix this. I really back myself, and then maybe we'll win on the first day of the season, like Rodgers did. And it's like, oh, maybe went away to Arsenal. We got a decent draw in 15-16. And I think West Ham beat us 3-0 or something like that. And it was like,
At Anfield, yeah.
You're right. But in October 2026, I don't think there's going to be a world-class manager who is on a sabbatical waiting for a job, because...
And even if you do get one, he's going to say, rightly so, the minute things don't go perfectly, well, of course, this is a sort of... fact-finding season for me. He's entitled to, even you do get Xabi Alonso, if you get him in October, November, he'll be the first to sort of imply that he gets a pass, whatever happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's this is a squad that needs a lot more work doing to it. And if I'm an agent or a young exciting footballer, I'm like, well, what's the crack? I mean, is he going to be here? Am I signing for him? Am I signing for somebody else? Where if you do make the change, then everyone's like, right, it's a new, fresh project. We're coming in to play under this person. And yeah, it's going to be a long old summer if it's confirmed at the end of the season that it is going to be Slot. And I feel bad saying that because of what he gave us 12 months ago. And that can't be forgotten. But this is much more than just a wobble now.
The Brendan Rodgers comparisons are very pertinent, I think, because even though Brendan Rodgers wasn't a title-winning Liverpool manager, he bloody well nearly was. And it's a very similar trajectory in a sense, Beth. Whether it's a cautionary tale or not, or whether the powers that be at Liverpool see it as a cautionary tale, because although they got it very right in that they got Jurgen Klopp in, there's a sense to which I think they were a little bit lucky that he was available at that particular moment in time. Now, we spoke off air beforehand. You said, well, I've said, and I think you'd agree with me, that they're not going to make a decision or unlikely to make a decision to axe the manager based on the next 2 results or the last 5 results. They will either have made a decision to firmly commit or to firmly move on a while back. It feels that Now, if they did make the decision to move on, they're doing a bloody good job at keeping that quiet. And I can have two dialogues in my own mind about this one. One, well, they would do, wouldn't they? Do you know what I mean? Because one thing I think you would say if you were the higher ups at Liverpool is, if you did want to have made the decision to change the manager a month, 2 months ago, but you knew you couldn't physically make that change till the summer, you'd say, well, what becomes of the rest of the season? I think you'd say to each other, well, what we definitely mustn't endanger is qualifying for the Champions League, because the worst thing to happen would be to hand a new manager a non-Champions League team. That would be awful, and also obviously for the finances of the club and the prospects of the transfer market. So I think, although you said the journalists are hearing nothing but the likelihood that Liverpool will not make the change, I think Liverpool would do everything in their power to make sure they didn't give any vibes that they'd make the change, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak it from what I've heard from conversations I've had, and there has been no glaring indications that they are going to change. And that's not me saying I agree with that or I don't agree with that. It's just that's the facts. And like you say, you can make. I mean, I've seen quite a few people say, and even going back sort of a month or so, people saying, it should be announced before the end of the season that they're going to shake hands and walk away, and then Slot would get a send-off on the final day. And to me, it's so naive to think like that, because that's not how that's just not how it works. And I think it would be incredibly disrespectful for any club to say to any title-winning manager, right, we don't believe you're the man to take us forward, but we do want you to qualify for the Champions League. But we're going to announce it now. We're going to tell everyone that we're going to get this more popular guy in. Yeah. But you're just going to, grin and bear it, guide this team to the Champions League, and then shake hands on the final day. That's just not how, life works, how football works.
Would you expect, though? Obviously, with sort of the circles that you work in, even if they were planning a change, would you expect them to say anything different? Because it's at such a. It's not like we're in a Man United position where we are now comfortably in the Champions League. It's like the whole thing's been like, well, you could, you're 90 minutes away from an FA Cup semi-final, you're 90 minutes away from a Champions League semi-final as it was a few weeks ago. Now we're pretty much stumbling over the line, albeit not confirmed, that we will be playing Champions League football. And it's just like, would they brief it any differently?
But I also think there's a bit of a misconception about sort of briefings, in the sense that, I think a lot that I've had this season, a lot of my colleagues have had, and even guys who are on the Wrap as contributors who have aren't at games as press or anything. The first thing anyone sort of levels at you is, oh, you're doing this to protect your access, or you're doing this because you've had a briefing, and this that's not how it works. No. It's not like we all get sat in a room and told, right, you have to parrot out this line that Arne Slot is staying as manager. That's just not how any club operates. It's certainly not how Liverpool operate. That there isn't really a briefing that comes from it. It's from conversations that you have with people. And like I say, I'm
sure as a journalist, if you ask anybody at Liverpool a direct question, they're going to tell you they're going to give you a direct answer, whether they're being truthful or not.
Yeah,
only time can tell.
I wrote a piece last week trying to sort of weigh up the fors and the againsts of him staying, and I sort of came to the conclusion that what is maybe the fair decision isn't necessarily the right decision, in the sense that I think you can, whether you agree with this, I'm sure people will say that they don't agree with this, but you can make a case that the fair decision is to let him see out the final year of his contract, based off the fact that he's a title-winning manager, based off the mitigation, based off the fact that Liverpool are likely to be in the Champions League. And on paper, if you look at all of those things, you can say, well, the fair decision is to let him have that final season. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right thing to do. And that is sort of where I'm at the moment, is that, I think I agree with what the guys have said, in the sense it's very hard for me to see a world where, if, as Mark said, if he loses at home to a Forest or something on the 4th game of the season, or even on, the 10th game of the season, having won his previous 9.
Game 1 would be a crisis.
Yeah.
If we didn't win the first game.
That would be just the toxicity. I think it's so hard to envision a world where, I think if he's able to turn it around from here, it will almost be unprecedented, I think, in the modern era. And that's not me saying 100% that can't happen. And that's not me saying I don't want that to happen, because I think, and again, this, again, I'm sure people will say this is you trying to protect access or whatever, and it isn't. I can only speak from the dealings that I have had with him as a human being, and he's a good guy. And again, that's not me saying that means that he should be kept in post without question for a long time. But that's why this season, I think a lot of the way that he's spoken about, and even the other day, I can scroll through Twitter, and I'll get 10 posts saying, I saw one the other day, I hope he has a terrible life. I wish nothing but the worst for him.
No. Kids all the time. God love them.
And that sort of level of vitriol is why that I found it quite hard to not give him sympathy and not give him time, because I just think that's wrong. That's my personal opinion.
And also there are people in the media space who have criticised him this season. Like, I've been saying this to basically anybody who listens. The trouble is, a lot of these people who sort of put these lines out there don't listen. It's like David Lynch over and over again has said that he basically thought the manager should have been sacked already at this point. Mo Stewart has come out and said it himself. These are people who do still have access. Like, I'm personally, especially now that I'm not attached to the Anfield Wrap, I'm not someone who has like access to Liverpool Football Club in the way that it's viewed. But those people do. They still attend press conferences, still do all this stuff, and they think the manager should be gone. So it's that sort of like ignorant, I'm just gonna put my hands over my ears, I'm gonna say terrible things because I can like get away with saying it. Whereas like if it was one journalist saying it to another journalist, you could sue for libel and stuff like that. So.
And it's like, if anyone had read anything that I've written over the course of this season, particularly over the last couple of months, I've been critical of the manager. I've been very critical of the manager. There's a difference between being critical and being, unprofessional and rude, which I think when people are saying, oh, why aren't you criticising them? That's, people don't want you to criticise.
Yeah, it's because you're not saying you should have a terrible life and stuff like that.
And that is what it is. So I am at this point, I think it would probably be in the best interest of all parties to shake hands in the summer and have a fresh start. But purely because I just don't see a way that he's able to convince people. I just don't see that happening. That's my opinion.
I think it's a fascinating topic, actually, what football managers actually do to make footballers win football matches, because they don't kick the ball. And obviously, we're all very invested in looking at their tactical astuteness and their in-game management, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of it is mystique and myth. A lot of it is creating an impression that there's magic in your fingertips and in something that you imbue in a team, Josh. And I feel, regardless of his qualities as a human being or his skills as a manager, the sheen has gone from him. Brendan Rodgers experienced the same thing, to use that comparison again. Brendan did a great job in nearly winning the Liverpool the league in 13-14. He did a really good job. Nobody had any respect or time for him by the end of it. And it's just a harsh fact of the job, and it's going to take time for people to look back and go, do you know, he actually won us the league, and I was horrible about him. I sort of do and don't blame people for behaving like that. But at the moment, on my mind is, I'm all business. I want to see what happens next. Let's turn to the name of Xabi Alonso, because at the end of the day, it's his spectre that makes this such an essential conversation. If he wasn't there, and we were just talking about Glasner or Iraola or, I don't know, bloody Nagelsmann, I would be less convinced that we had to make a change for change's sake. And Xabi Alonso exists because he demonstrates some quality clearly, but he's able to project the mythology I was talking about at the beginning of this long-winded point.
He looks great in a cashmere jumper.
Looks great in a cashmere
Very
jumper.
handsome man. Yeah.
Looks great in anything, really.
Yeah.
He does. Central casting of the manager that takes you off into the next phase. It's Xabi. I find it interesting that a manager who will clearly be in demand for all clubs who haven't got managers or are dissatisfied with their managers, hasn't been firmly linked with anyone other than us, really, yet. And even us, only so much. But definitely there's no firm links anywhere else. I saw some tentative ones to Chelsea, but nowhere else.
That's the thing. I think every other link feels tentative because there's someone who you sort of assume is a better candidate for that job. And when I say better, I don't mean like more suited or anything like that. I just mean like, with City, a lot of people think that the reason Maresca was sacked by Chelsea was almost out of spite because he was talking to City, and because that seems like a natural sort of almost boot room like succession for City is to hire a fellow who was in Pep's backroom staff once. with Chelsea, it feels like it's been Iraola until it wasn't recently with, Iraola now being reported to be going to Crystal Palace. Chelsea, the ones who I'm kind of suddenly worried about have come on the scene. I think like one of the comparisons that's been made over and over again with the sort of back end of Slot, if we're calling it this now, at least sort of, presumptively, if nothing else, is the Brendan Rodgers comparison. I think what ends up, happening in quite a nice sort of succinct way is that assuming that Jurgen Klopp was the number one target to replace Brendan Rodgers, even from the point of the end of the 14-15 season, Klopp was on his sabbatical, so he wasn't ready to take that job at that stage, and keeping Brendan on actually ends up being the sliding doors moment that leads to you to get Jurgen Klopp in October or November, or whenever it was that Jurgen eventually took over. It feels like it's actually the opposite way around with this, where the guy who at least we're all assuming is the number one candidate for the job and who feels in our hearts like he should be the number one candidate for the job is possibly only available in the summer. I think hanging on until, as Mark said before, if you go and do it in October or November instead, in the way to how you did it with Brendan, it opens up the World Cup managers a little bit more maybe, because the reason they wouldn't be able to take over in pre-season is because they'd be away with their World Cup teams. But then it means you've lost pre-season as well, so you've lost that
another
ability to exactly it's et into their time of how much they can change things and have the summer to change things. It obviously worked for us with Klopp to still get a new manager in and part way into the season, but it's because Jurgen was such a spiritual leader. I think why with Brendan, why he lost a bit of faith is that it just felt like every press conference he leant back on cliches and things that just didn't inspire the fans at all. And when that's your only window into how inspirational is this fella, what are the intangibles that you all talk about there, which is the mentality he imparts onto footballers. Well, whenever we saw Brendan have a chance to do that, it felt like you are delusional, mate. So I can't imagine what the players are thinking, looking at you when you're holding up 3 envelopes in front of them and stuff, and they're seasoned professionals. And it's kind of getting to that point with Slot now, but I actually think the toxicity under Slot, unless I'm misremembering what the back end of Brendan was like a little bit, is actually worse. It feels worse in the ground, the boos, I think are worse, sort of trying to remember back a little bit.
I think it is because it's like, we are the champions. We are the champions, and it's
definitely an expectation level, though.
Yeah, and the most exciting summer, sort of transfer-wise, with I think we broke the record 3 times, our own club record 3 times to sign these exciting players, and whatever it is, it hasn't worked. And I wasn't there on Saturday, but I have been there most of the time this season, and I've just never felt so disconnected to what I see, and I even take that back to, take it back to Hodgson all those years ago. I think it was I was very young then, and I was just like, this is just football or whatever. But I'm just I can't see what the plan is, and I think the fact that you're looking at very, very good footballers on this pitch makes it all the more baffling. And I just don't see what the plan is. And
you almost judge him more harshly because he's sort of, I guess, in the same mould as Brendan. He's seen as this tactician coach, isn't he? Maybe the reason they leave wanting in press conferences a bit, or maybe the reason it sometimes looks like the players are a little bit almost demotivated as well, because these guys are just cold hard tacticians really. But when the tactics are so far removed from what you want to see, that's where it is difficult. And I don't think Alonso is by any stretch of the imagination. He may not even be a better tactician than Slot, really, in terms of credentials over the course of his career. Listen, he won the Bundesliga unbeaten, which you maybe say is better than anything that Slot has achieved. But in terms of the actual coaching acumen or whatever, maybe Slot is better. Xabi Alonso is certainly no Jurgen Klopp in terms of I don't expect him to come in and suddenly inspire all this belief and do so much outside of just coaching the football team that really takes you along for the journey. But even if he straddles those 2 things a little bit better than Slot has done, I think we'll all feel more optimistic about it, because I've said it on shows before, and it becomes that intangible thing you reference, Rob, unquantifiable thing, is you just want to be taken along for the journey, and at the moment you don't necessarily feel like this fella is doing it. And I if nothing else, the first game of next season, if it's Xabi Alonso in the dugout and we lost the first game of next season, I'm not suddenly going to be like, well, this is completely hopeless. Whereas if it's Slot, there's maybe an extent to which, and even I'm not completely Slot out, as I said, I'm still going to feel like it's pretty hopeless if we lose the first game of next season.
It's all about direction of travel. I mean, I sat there watching very carefully. I decided during the depths of despair in that Chelsea game to sort of watch what our plan seemed to be about pressing a team. Because everything that I've noticed that's been bad about this season is good about previous Liverpool teams, both Jurgen Klopp and the Arne Slot team of last season, is their desire to get a football back. That is the key, and it's the key to any successful team at the highest level in England. At the very least, it's always been the team that works hardest and can get the ball back, and then you worry about retaining it, but getting it back quickly. Nobody's last 5 yards press was A grade. There was jockeying for position. I'd see Isak move to cover his man. Where was the burst for the last 5 minutes? But the trouble was, no one was hunting in packs either. There was no sense of, we'll take a risk. 3 of us will jump, and then we'll jump. There was none of that, which rattles and unnerves the team, which was the hallmark of the teams we've watched for the last 10 years. And I see nothing that makes me think that'll go in another direction. Now, one thing that can change it is, have we got different types of footballers, Mark? Have we got different types of footballers? We've gone from having the Sadio Manes, the Firminos, the Luis Diaz's, those kind of footballers, the other version of Mo Salah, who are quick on their heels, the Jordan Hendersons, could be in people's faces quickly. Liverpool possibly, can they solve this in the transfer market this summer? Can they buy those kind of footballers, or is it about coaching?
I think it's a mixture of both, because the changes that were made were on his watch. I'm not saying that he is sort of this godlike figure that makes all the decisions. We know that there is, we've got Richard Hughes in place, who's probably been working behind the scenes. And I think FSG are trying to get to a model where the way that the club operates is like very much, they are the head coach, not the manager. And not that they want to, change manager every 6 months like Chelsea do, but that the model's always going to be the same and similar, and then we'll always get a type of head coach that can suit it.
It's to minimise the impact of managerial change.
Because obviously
you should sack more. It does.
Yeah.
Look what Real Madrid do. Sorry to cut across you, but look what Real Madrid do. They've so devalued the status of the manager. They're virtually treating him like the cricket teams or the rugby teams do. The senior players and the higher ups, the director of football, decide how this broadly goes, and the coach is literally there to do something.
If they go for Mourinho, it's literally roll on, roll off. They'll have Ancelotti again soon, then it'll be Zidane again soon.
Yeah.
And quietly, there'll be some murmurings. They'll win a couple of La Ligas and a few European Cups. Chelsea, for a while, has sort of did that as well with their quickness of changing manager. But this is almost a test of the new model. I'm going to come to you on it, Beth. If you are going to have a strong higher-up structure with the director of football and devalue the manager to call him a coach, I think you've also got to be prepared to make the change when things aren't ideal and keep twisting.
Yeah, I think that's why almost the head coach model at Liverpool isn't a universally popular thing, because I think Liverpool historically are a club that has revered their manager as the man, and certainly the last manager was the man in a way that a lot of the managers that had come before him in the last 25 years weren't really. Obviously Rafa was, but in a different way. So. Yes, I agree with you in one sense. It should maybe make clubs more sort of sanguine about making managerial changes if they don't think things are going to change a lot. But equally, then it begs the question of, how much responsibility do you put on the coach if things start to go wrong? Because then surely it's sort of your own failings in terms of recruitment.
It's a paradox of sorts, isn't it? Yeah.
So it is hard. I mean, I think just coming back to what you said earlier about pressing and things like that for me is the most damning indictment of this team, is that both Chelsea and Tottenham came to Anfield on losing runs of at least 5 games, and there've been pockets in those games where they've looked like they've been running more, working harder, having more urgency to get the ball, and these are teams mired in crisis against Liverpool team that are at home, that should be up for it, they're just not, and I think that's such a it's not hard to get the Liverpool crowds on side. Ordinarily, I would say I think it's why sort of Milos Kirk has endeared himself to the fan base over the course of the season, is because he always gives 110%. His performances might, sometimes leave things to be desired. He's still a young player, he's still learning. But I think the amount of times this season where he's sort of slid into a challenge, or, he's won a throw-in and he's just been really pumped up, and the crowd have really appreciated that. And I just don't think there's been enough of that. There were points on Saturday where Dominic Szoboszlai was running around like a headless chicken, sort of Andy Robertson-esque against Man City in 2017-18, where he's just sort of trying to close down 4 players, and he gets the appreciation for that. The cops start singing for him. But again, it's 1 player, it's 2 players, when Liverpool fans are used to seeing 6, 7, 8 players doing that. So the question is, does that come from the manager? Does that come from the players? Would having a fresh voice change that? Because, that next season, I think as a bare minimum, whoever is in charge, you need to have that desire, that intensity that has been lacking. And I think, Alonso, I completely understand the arguments for him, and I do think sort of in terms of the romantic, the emotional lure of him coming back would give everyone a lift. I do think that. I think in terms of his style of football, I actually don't think it will be massively dissimilar to what this Liverpool side are trying to be or would be with different players. I think, it is more, possession based, it is more methodical, it isn't sort of a Jurgen Klopp kind of football.
You see, we've heard that a few times. Can we just stay with you on this one? That drives me mad when that's said. People are going to have to get used to a bit more of a patient passing style from Arsenal. So it was said even, I think, early last season, but in a way we saw more of the carry on from the Klopp era, though those players have been coached by Klopp predominantly. Why? Why are we meant to just take that lying down?
I'm not saying that you are meant to, I just don't think there's many managers out there now that play in that kind of way.
Seems to be those that come to Anfield like are prepared to press more than us, though.
Yeah, no, I think pressing is almost a different thing in a way. I think no matter what system you're employing, the press needs to be better than it's been this season.
Yeah,
it's one thing Alonso did well at Madrid as well, as he got those prima donnas there to press better than they'd ever pressed under any manager previously.
And also, when he was at Leverkusen, and it was that unbeaten season was sort of opening up, and it was looking impressive. I remember sort of, looking into it, and like one of the things that the experts were saying was how quickly they pressed the ball back. They were top of all the metrics in the Bundesliga, especially at a particular time. I don't have them all to hand.
Yeah.
It's funny with what you talk about, sort of, it doesn't take much for us to actually get behind something. When Jurgen Klopp came in, he says something on the the press conference. He's unveiled saying, we can talk. It's all well and good talking about how good this fan base is, similar to Dortmund, but we need to give something for them to actually get behind and roar. And if we're just going to pass it around and it be slow, well, we can't expect them to also give us that shot in the arm that we're going to need at times. So, and I think with the whole past that Alonso has and that connection to our childhood and everything else, I think surely it has to.
I just kind of wonder if this model will be another one of those business decisions that FSG makes that they'll eventually climb down on, and they'll go for someone who is a bit more of like a spiritual leader type manager than just a pure tactician head coach vibe.
What's his name?
Well, that's the trouble.
That's the difficult thing. It's like I had sort of Sky on the other day, and someone was saying about Unai Emery being linked to Liverpool, and a pundit said, will he get a lot more control over things at Liverpool than he would at Villa? And I was just like,
style of football is turgid.
But not even just that. It's like, if Unai Emery were to come into Liverpool now, he's a manager at Aston Villa. He's got, that team is built in his image. He's got control over everything. Nobody who comes into Liverpool at this moment in time is getting that kind of control. But also, I know what you mean in terms of, could FSG end up sort of climbing down from that decision? But there's only really that I can think of, Luis Enrique, who is sort of the
manager,
the real sort of the man. And I think, a lot of Liverpool fans, he would be the dream appointment. And, he's got PSG playing a fantastic brand of football. But I can't think of too many other managers really at this moment in time who are like that, as opposed to being a head coach.
I think I'm going to wrap it now. And I've actually left loads of names of players that we could have talked about. And Neil said to me earlier this morning, we were messaging each other, have you got enough material for 2 gutter shows this week? And I said, Neil, I've always got enough material for 2 gutter shows this week. I certainly have now, because there's all kinds of people that you're going to have to YouTube the ass off whoever's with me next. And sorry to make you haven't done this, Mark, because we talk nothing but manager. I always get very carried away by the manager chat. I do, and I think your point about FSG, and I'll finish just with my monologue, just your comment about FSG and climbing down. I do wonder if they're facing the reality of this fact that if they get this decision wrong this summer, they very much are going to look like they misjudged a situation quite profoundly. Whether they want to be those guys yet again, I think we'll see soon.